Pythagorean philosopher, a contemporary of Socrates, and he was an accomplished mathematician and musicologist. We have a diatonic scale attributed to him. It's the same scale that is called nowadays the Pythagorean scale. And again, we find it in Babylon and other places, but it's attributed in that period to Philolaus, who measured it and who gave a precise method of tuning. Most likely, this tuning method was in widespread use across Greece and everywhere, Egypt, the Near East, Babylon, Italy, whatever. Like, this tuning system was probably not invented by Philolaus. It was explained mathematically through Philolaus. And in a second, I'm going to show you exactly how it's tuned. But beyond this scale, Philolaus also provided us with many cosmological, metaphysical theories, and as well as works in biology and physiology and science. So he was a very accomplished, again, kind of integral thinker who was transdisciplinary, working in many areas. What's really interesting about Philolaus is he sort of is taking Pythagorean insights, Pythagorean cosmology, and again, we don't have a good understanding of what that looked like before these figures, but he's taking that and most likely adapting it and developing it and evolving it based on other pre-Socratic thinkers. So he comes much later after we have all of these pre-Socratic thinkers like Thales and Anaximander and Empedocles and a whole slew of people, Heraclitus, right? And so he's using insights and terminology developed by those thinkers to sort of reframe Pythagoreanism and bring it up to date with the contemporary conversation of his time among pre-Socratic thinkers. And his book starts with this fantastic line. It's so interesting and very, condensing the main insights of his whole work into one sentence. He says, "Nature in the cosmos," which is already a kind of weird thing to say, nature in the cosmos, because we usually think of those as being kind of synonyms, but here nature must mean some kind of ordering principle, some kind of principle of growth and of essence and something of that sort, right? So nature, the kind of productive, creative force in the cosmos, he says, was harmonized from both unlimiteds and limiters. Again, here we're in a very thick terminological, slightly abstract mathematical kind of set of terms, but from the surface, it feels very robust, very thought-provoking. Wow, what are these unlimiteds, right? Like something infinite, something continuous, something flowing, something qualitatively rich or something, right? And then limiters, something coming in and ordering and organizing. We have this kind of chaos and order, this, productive potentiality, and then something that puts that potentiality to use. And we find this, sort of in music, right? Like in music, we have this unlimited number of pitches, like I showed in the last module by sliding my finger up the cello. But then we have scales and melodies where we limit that infinite and chop it up right into a scale. And he says that in nature, nature in the cosmos has this harmonization of unlimiteds and limiters. So harmony here is playing a basic metaphysical role. It's like, in Pythagoras, if numbers were the most important thing, in a way, harmony is becoming more important for Philolaus. It's what allows all of this to come together in some way that actually does something. And he says in another fragment that the world is made up of these antagonistic realities, unlimited and limited. Those are opposites, right? We have hot and cold. We have activity and passivity. All of these opposites should never, he says, interact with one another. But the cosmos was created in such a way that they were harmonized, that they were brought together, that the contraries were able to mutually intertwine and do something together. And this really reminds me of Heraclitus. Heraclitus says that there's things at variance in the world, and people have a hard time understanding how things at variance, things going off in different directions, things departing from one another, diverging, could come together and be in harmony. And he says, but look at the lyre and the bow, right? The lyre, the stringed instrument, the bow being, like an archer, Apollo. Both of these have a harmony by being in tension, right? And here, harmony, tension have a kind of mutual sense to them. Harmony means fitting things together that didn't necessarily just fit together on their own. It's kind of activity required to bring things together, kind of tune them, bring them into attention and attunement together. So, yeah, the account of Philolaus, and again, we don't really have much. We only have a couple fragments, but it's very interesting that these things, unequal, unlike each other, are brought together and locked together into harmony. And harmony comes and changes the nature of physical things, right? And I don't think he thought that there was first stuff and then harmony came along. No, baked into the very reality of the universe is this inner tension of things that we call harmony. So I'm going to give you a little demo on how Philolaus tuning works. This is a strange harp that I made a few years ago, and it's based on a Chinese harp called a guzheng, but it works for this purpose as well. It's an 8-string harp. I need to restring it. Some of these strings are a little dead sounding, but basically it's easy to tune because you can just move these bridges. So the way that this tuning works is that you start by tuning the outer strings into a perfect octave. So once you have the outer octave tuned, you tune the string in the middle. It's not directly in the middle because it's an 8-string instrument, but it's called meze, which means middle in Greek. You tune that to a perfect fourth, which is also tunable by ear. And that's a fifth above, so now I've got meze tuned. So that's a fifth, and this is a fourth. Now from there, I can tune up from a fifth from my lowest string. And that one's flat, we can hear. So I just move the bridge up till it's in tune. So that is the basic structure of the lyre tuning for the ancient Greeks, is these 4 notes. Those notes will always remain the same. It's these intervening notes here that will vary. So now that we have that basic structure, how do we tune those other notes? According to Philolaus, we continue using a series of fourths and fifths in the same way that we already tuned. So if I start with this note, the meze, I can go up a fourth from that instead of a fifth. This was a fifth. Here's a fourth. And we can hear that it's out of tune. Music come up. Now we can hear it in tune. And now that I have that note, I can go down a fifth from that. It's a little sharp, so I'll move it down. Now from that note, I can go up a fourth. Again, flat. A little sharp now. And then from that note, I can go down a fifth. And I have now completed the tuning. I've tuned every note. That is Philolaus tuning, and it uses all of these beautiful concords. All of those intervals are perfectly just tuned intervals. What that means is that this interval, this interval, this interval, this interval, and this interval are all identical mathematically. They're all 9 to 8 ratios, because that's the same ratio that is the distance between a fifth and a fourth. So if I go up a fourth and then go up a fifth, the notes are 9 to 8 different, and because we used only fourths and fifths to tune this tuning, all of those intervals will be 9 to 8. But what does that mean is that this interval, this small interval, and this interval, what might be called a half tone, is not so pretty of a number. It's not a super particular ratio. It is not a perfectly tuned interval. It's 256 over 243. This very strange kind of, why that number? Well, because of the way that ends up drifting, like our circle. Remember our circle of drifts, of the drifting fifths. That produces but it has a beautiful sound to it, no doubt. And you can play chords with it. And that is Philolaus tuning on a lyre.